Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice. And I am Tails here, and we are from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our new Let's Play for the channel. Well, technically this is actually going to be the second time we're going to be experiencing this game right here, which as you can see on screen, we're about to be playing through Donkey Kong Country Returns again. Except this time, Sonic, is about the fact that we are now tackling through the most recent release of the Nintendo Switch version of Donkey Kong Country Returns, known as Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. So, yeah, I can't even believe about the fact that this game has already been out for about a month ago, since on the 16th of January. Now, for the most part though, it's about the fact that technically we already did this game before, thanks to both Mighty and Ray, since and around almost 2 years ago on the original Wii version of Donkey Kong Country Returns, where, usually relatively speaking, that Let's Play did turn out to be pretty well, and as a result we can figure about the fact that we can do this game again, except this time with much more better picture quality, and not to mention though is about the fact that we are experiencing, let's just say, certain content we haven't exactly experienced yet, because we originally decided able to do Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D for the 3DS, but like we've already established that before in the past, unfortunately though, the Let's Play of the Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D not only is incredibly redundant now, but alongside with that, that particular Let's Play has officially been cancelled. So we figure that we can able to actually skip ahead and jump into Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, because if you couldn't tell, that this particular version of the game plays pretty similar to the forms of how it does it on the 3DS version, if you couldn't tell, thanks to the forms of this particular demo play, if you leave the title screen for long enough. And this means about the fact that you remember back in 2013, right, Tails? Oh yeah, what about it? Basically though, it's about the fact that back in the day, that there was actually a 3DS version of Donkey Kong Country Returns, which appears to be called Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, where basically, in addition about the fact that it plays pretty much like the Wii counterparts, except, well, the game only runs at 30 FPS instead of the original 60 frames per second. In addition to that, there's also some additional new features was been added. In addition to that, there's also 8 new levels was actually included for the sake of the 3DS version back then. So we'll talk more details about that as soon as we're able to actually dive into this game basically, or should I say this particular version of the game specifically. Well, as a matter of fact though, it's about the fact that this particular version of the game was first announced thanks to the forms of, you know, June Nintendo Direct last year, specifically on the 18th of June, if I can recall correctly, in 2024, and I was like, okay, that's a bit odd, especially concerning for all that, well, people were expecting to able to be wished for a brand new installment of the Donkey Kong series of games, despite the fact that the last entry in the series was actually Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and technically the Wii U version, because it's been like, you know, 11 years since the latest installment of the Donkey Kong Country game series, so in addition to Donkey Kong games in general. So now as you can see on screen, before you start the game off, you're able to actually have a choice between 2 different modes. There's the original mode, where it plays pretty much exactly like the forms of how it does on the Wii version, like basically though you're able to actually go for the game with only 2 hearts, including 4 if you do have Diddy Kong with you. In addition to that is about the fact that I'm pretty sure that we'll save more topics more about it, enjoy it at some point once we dive into this particular version of the game. But there's also the modern mode, or technically back on the 3DS version it was originally called New Mode, despite the fact that New is a little bit redundant right now, but we figure we're most able to mention about this anyway. So anyway, in a modern mode right here, I think this is the mode we are going to be tackling through for this particular version of the game this time, because technically that both Mighty and Ray have already experienced the original mode on the original hardware on the Nintendo Wii, so we figured about the fact that we're about to show you guys some new features that has usually been found on not only for the 3DS version's new mode, but alongside with the forms of the modern mode for the Nintendo Switch version of Donkey Kong Country Returns. So now, you can still able to actually experience the game within 1-player mode or 2-player mode, but unfortunately though, co-op is not going to be a thing for this Let's Play, because I'll explain more details about that if we get onto one of those levels in particular, specifically in one of those temple stages in the game. So because of that though, yeah, let's just go and quickly check on the actual option settings quickly. Yeah, I think that should be all good to go with not only the audio, but alongside with the sound effects as well, including with the phone's this brand new feature, which appears to be HD Rumble, so it actually just is able to go a lot more vibration that's been going on. And the control types we'll go for is, of course, the one and only, the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, because it is so dang comfortable to use. And not only that, though, as you can tell, there is actually a motion controls option where I think it only functions if you do have Joy-Cons paired up, or if you try to use the singular Joy-Con. Basically, though, it's about the fact that you can able to actually use motion controls. So, relatively speaking, though, as you can see on the bottom left corner of these instructions right there, basically, though, if you use motion controls, you can able to do all sorts of actions, ranging from blow, roll, and ground pound. So, whilst unlike the Switch Pro controller, as well as handheld mode, there's no such thing as motion controls. So, yeah, I want to classify for noticing this right from the get-go. So, either way, now, of course, just like the forms of how it does it on Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze for the Switch version, basically, though, you can able to actually change the specific button layouts, whatever you prefer. But anyway, enough about that particular distractions. Let's dive into Donkey Kong Country Returns HD for the Nintendo Switch. So, and the only downside I can probably think about for this particular version of the game is that the loading times are much longer than the forms of how it does on the previous two versions, both on the Wii and the 3DS version. So, anyway, let's watch the opening cutscene, but this time within gorgeous HD 1080p quality. Now, unlike the Wii version, that you have to use motion controls and able to actually beat the likes of one of the Tiki tribes, well, this time around though, including the 3DS version, as you can tell, we are now doing button mashing, similar to the forms of how it does it in Tropical Freeze as well, depending on what controller method you're going to be using with either the Wii U gamepad or with the Wii U Pro controller and all that stuff. So, yeah, here's the forms of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, and as you can tell, this particular version of the game plays very identical to the previous two versions within the original Wii version as well as the 3DS version, although I'm very grateful about the fact that we can able to actually experience the game again, except this time on a different system. I'm guessing that the reason why, about the fact that, the actual logo on the TV monitor screen is basically unchanged, so Yeah, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that if you couldn't tell already, about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 17th of February today, in some cases in 2025 today, and so much to the point for the fact that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that what's going to be happening for this entire whole week, although, apart from the fact that hopefully, though, that Blaze the Cat will definitely going to be coming back on playing through Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games on the DS version at some point in this coming weekend, and so much to the point for the fact that just before, you know, spring is almost approaching at some point soon, so we figure about the fact that we can able to actually taking care of the forms of other games for the time being. So, because, you know, recently that Silver the Hedgehog has already recently finished up every single aspect in terms of Sonic X Shadow Generations, and oh no, he did have a really great time experiencing that particular version of the game, including with the forms of Shadow Generations as well. Yeah, I can honestly agree with that, Sonic, especially considering for all that, well, how incredibly hyped that particular game can be, alongside with the forms of the upcoming Sonic Racing Cross Worlds at some point in the future. So maybe potentially speaking, I was about the fact that we'll try to figure something out just before, you know, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds is going to be releasing at some point soon, sometime in June forms within this year for 2025, but we can't tell exactly for sure just yet though, but we shall wait and see what happens. So, yeah, anyway, so as you can tell, since we're going to be experiencing new mode in Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, this means, as you can see on screen, we now have 3 hearts, but as soon as you bring out Diddy Kong with you, you're now able to have 6 hearts. So meaning about the fact that between new mode and modern mode, in between with both the 3DS version and the Switch version, this particular mode is basically the easy mode of the game, mainly because, as you can definitely tell, you now have more hearts, which as a result, it might feel a bit slightly similar to the forms of how it does it in Funky mode from the likes of the Switch version of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I almost said Returns again, because I know for a fact that we tend to really enjoy Donkey Kong Country Returns a lot back in the day, both on the Wii and the 3DS version, and even nowadays with the Switch version. So as a result, similar to the forms of how it does on the 3DS version, you can able to actually play this game on the go. So as a result, though, is about the fact that if you couldn't tell, yes, we did manage to able to complete this game 200%, which as a result, we can now able to actually show you guys what really happens if you do manage to able to complete the game either on the Wii or the 3DS version, or nowadays with the Switch version with 200% completion. So that way, because unlike in 2023 with the original Wii version that both Mighty and Ray, unfortunately though, they have not able to actually accomplish 200% completion on the original Wii version. So yeah, that'll be a perfect opportunity. We can now able to show off some extra stuff if you do manage to able to complete the game with 200%. So either way, and of course, speaking of which, much like the forms of how it does on the Wii version playthrough, we're able to try to go after not only all the Kong letters, but alongside with that, there's also some puzzle pieces you know as well. And I believe all of those puzzle pieces are basically in the exact same locations as the forms of how it does on the previous 2 versions, so there's nothing different from there. So we can basically try to memorize the forms of where these puzzle pieces can be, alongside with the forms of specific strategies of the forms of trying to able to obtain several of Kong letters. So anyway, let's go ahead and... Oh, nice! Ugh. Goodness gracious, I would say doing button mashing where it comes to able to hitting the DK logo is actually way trickier than it looks, because I'm pretty much used to with the Wii remote with all its motion controls and all that. I mean, true, no matter what though, we can able to actually use Joy-Cons if we decided to, but regardless of such though, is about the fact that we'll also have to stick around with the Switch Pro controller from now on. So anyway, so that, yeah, that pretty much does it for the first stage right here. And as a result, the first stage was actually called Jungle Hijinks. So yeah, self-explanatory for this particular stage. And now we can move on to the next level, which I suppose, do you want to have your turn, Tails? Yeah, of course, I might as well give this a shot, because after all, though we've technically already experienced this version of the game already, so here we go on to World 1-2, King of Kling. So, either way, and I'm pretty sure for this particular level right here, we're able to actually introduce into ourselves with the forms of, what is up with the forms of those 9 squares, Sonic? Oh, yes. Let's mention about this right now. Normally, on the Wii version, in the original version of the game, basically though, with the item inventory system, you can only carry up to only one item, and then meanwhile, on the 3DS version, specifically if you manage to experience the new mode, you can able to actually hold up to 3 items, whilst now, on the Switch version, as you can tell, we are now going to be holding up to 9 items, which as a result, that makes the entire version of the game 10 times as easy compared to the forms of how it does on the previous 2 versions for sure. I mean, relatively speaking, that was about the fact that, of course, just like the forms of how it does on the original Wii version playthrough, we're probably not going to use that much inventory items. At least we'll try our best if we're able to do not die so many times, and as a result, we'll try our best to obtain every single puzzle pieces as much as we could. So either way, because again, that both Mighty and Ray, whoa, good lord, that was a definition of a close call right there. Yeah, because for some odd reason, it's about the fact I've almost got to clip through with that particular hungry plant right here, or a hungry piranha right there, but as a result, I did somehow manage to still survive, regardless of the forms of that particular hitbox, but either way. So yeah, let's talk about the forms of some news and discussions alike. For instance, though, is about the fact that recently, though, what I've actually noticed something, is that speaking of which, in regards to the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, about the fact that not only for the fact that we can able to actually experience some familiar mechanics from not only from Sonic Riders, because the Extreme Gears are now finally back, after 15 years since Sonic 3 Riders, except now, we don't have to thankfully try to worry about trying to get ourselves with this godforsaken Kinect accessory for the Xbox 360, and also we're able to actually come across that familiar mechanic from Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transforms, which appears to be the transformed segments within not only do you try to fly in the air, but also try to able to actually get into the actual boat segments with all that particular, well, driving into water and stuff like that, or lava potentially, that those mechanics are now finally back. So yeah, we totally appreciate about that, because I know for a fact that a lot of players out there really do enjoy, not only for the likes of Sonic Riders, specifically 2 games specifically, not the 3rd one, just because the 3rd one is pretty much rubbish in comparison, just because of the terrible controls and all that stuff, plus because the story in Sonic 3 Riders feels a bit, I don't know, bare bones in comparison to the forms of how interesting it was from the likes of in the first game and the second game respectively, just because the forms of that particular plot MacGuffin we got able to try to get used to with that. And also, for the fact that no matter what though, is about the fact that for what I can tell, there aren't any Sega guest characters in Sonic 3 Riders, because unlike in the original game, alongside with Sonic Rider Zero Gravity, it does manage to feature Sega guest characters, like for instance in Sonic Riders, you do able to actually play as Ooh-La-La from Space Channel 5, alongside with Knights from Nights into Dreams, and even Ai from Super Monkey Ball. And then meanwhile, for the likes of Zero Gravity, you still able to actually get a chance to play as Knights from Nights into Dreams, and in addition to that, there's also Amigo from Summer the Amigo, and even Billy Hatcher from Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. Whilst, unlike in Sonic 3 Riders though, there aren't any Sega guest characters, which is definitely totally of a bummer and pretty much a wasteful choice, especially considering for all that. Well, at the very least, you do able to experience some other racers in Sonic 3 Riders, which is of course Vector the Crocodile, in addition to Metal Sonic and Avatar as well for the Xbox 360. So anyway, but I'm still very grateful for the fact that, well, usually relatively speaking, not only is Cream the Rabbit has now finally become playable in a Sonic racing game since Sonic 3 Riders, but alongside with that, Sage is now going to be playable in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, so I'm very curious to know what other characters they'll do somehow bring, but I do know for certain, for one thing in mind, that apparently though, according to the forms of the Digital Deluxe Edition of the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, where basically though, if you do manage to purchase the game digitally within the Digital Deluxe set, not only do you get yourselves the base game itself, but alongside with that, there's also early access to the game, much like the forms of how it does in Sonic X Shadow Generations, but alongside with that, DLC Season Pass will be a thing, and finally, most notably out of them all though, Sonic Prime playable characters is going to be coming to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, so I'm very curious to know what specific set amount of characters they'll do bring. Like, I don't know, they're trying to bring 9, or one of those egg counselors, or just any other characters from Sonic Prime. Although, despite the fact that I will admit it though right away, it has been about a whole year since I actually have last watched Sonic Prime, but I do know for certain for one thing that Sonic Prime has now been available onto Nickelodeon TV channel unexpectedly, which I think technically we've already know about this for this point, Sonic, especially concerning for all that. Well, obviously that was about the fact you get the idea for this point. So, anyway, before we get into more details about the upcoming stuff for Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, as you can see, we're able to actually come across into, well, you're still able to actually get a chance to buy 1-up balloons, which is self-explanatory. In addition to that, we're still able to come across into ourselves the heart boost, which gives you additional heart. In addition to that, Squawks the Parrot will allow you to able to search for those missing puzzle pieces you did somehow missed on your first run through. In addition to that, the Banana Shake will allow you to able to go into temporary invincibility, or in some cases you'll become golden mode. In addition to that, we're able to actually have 3 new items, which is only exclusive into the new mode on the 3DS version / modern mode on the Switch version. Like, as you can see, we're able to actually come across into the DK Barrel, which allows you to able to free Diddy Kong at any time if you do somehow manage to able to, like, keep on getting hit most of your time. And there's also with the falls the green balloon, where basically though, if you fall into a pit, basically though, it just potentially trying to bring you back into the stage itself if you accidentally fell into the pit. And finally though, there's this crash guard, which can only be useful if you come across into certain stages where if you try to hop into a minecart or the rocket barrel for instance, well obviously though that will potentially becomes a little bit more handy, and that will give you a temporary invincibility for a while. So because of that though, and like we've already established that before, we're probably not going to use the actual, the inventory items for this particular playthrough, just because, after all, we've already experienced this game before, since, like, you know, on the Wii version. So because of that, though, yeah, let's just go and dive into the next level right here, and this time it's now my turn, so as a result, thanks to Tails did manage able to pass the controller over, so we'll basically take turns to able to actually go from level to level, basically. So because of that, though, including with the 8 new levels that, you know, originally came from the 3DS version, so, anyway. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What was your favorite version of Donkey Kong Country Returns? Do you like the Wii version, or do you like the 3DS version, or nowadays with the Switch version? So I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, because, well, generally speaking, I was about the fact that I will admit it though right away, the Switch version is actually almost a flawless version, but there are a few, little bit of nitpicking points when it comes to likely for this version of the game compared to the forms of how it does it on the Wii version to me though. Like, I will admit it though is about the fact that the load times are noticeably worse than the forms of how it does it in the previous 2 versions, despite the fact that the Switch version does manage able to offer us the Switch game card. So as a result though, we can able to expect that the load times might load a lot more quicker. But it turns out that's not the case, because usually on the Wii version it only runs on discs, and generally on the 3DS version it also runs on the game card. Well, despite the fact that on the other hand though, it's about the fact on the 3DS version, where basically though, if you get into the transition of the loading screen, then in the 3DS version, the actual background scrolling does not scroll at all. If you dive into the level, or if you return back into the world map and all that, well, I'm very grateful for the fact that on the Switch version we can able to actually see scrolling backgrounds at the very least though, much like the forms of how it does on the Wii version, including with Tropical Freeze as well, both either the Wii U version or the Switch version. So, anyway. So yeah, enough about that. The next thing we want to point out, in terms of the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, there is technically confirmed, for the sake of the forms of there was actually another gimmick about the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and that's what appears to be travel ring system. Like, if you go into the next lap, like for instance though, there was like, if you get into the first lap, when you start the race, then the race starts off as normal. But as soon as you get into lap 2, and possibly lap 3, then you would able to actually come across into different, level themes you might able to actually traverse into. Like, so far, at the moment right now, the game is expected to be confirmed that there's going to be 24 main tracks and 15 cross worlds. So as a result, in terms of main tracks we somehow got so far, that's what appears to be Metal Harbor from Sonic Adventure 2, and there's also Rainbow Garden, Ocean View, E-Stadium, Wonder Museum, and Water Palace from Sonic Rush, at least as far as I can recall. And then meanwhile, for the likes of the forms of Cross Worlds, they somehow already confirmed Roulette Road, oh that sounds familiar, alongside with the forms of Sky Road, Kraken Bay, Dinosaur Jungle, which we might be familiar with that particular name because that was actually originated from Sonic and the Secret Rings for the Nintendo Wii. And there's also Lava Cave, and as far as the other track names, as far as we like to point things out, there's technically 3 of those TBA tracks we've somehow known of, and that's what appears to be this unknown city with a Chow Park, which, kind of think about it, while looking back on the footage, it kind of reminds me like a similar vibes as in Water Park, from the likes of Mario Kart 8 / Mario Kart 8 Deluxe somehow. So anyway, I guess it's now your turn, Tails, to tackle for the next stage, which appears to be Sunset Shore. So as a result, yeah, we are very grateful to be back for experiencing the Silhouette kind of levels. So, oh yes, because we do remember about the fact that the Silhouette kind of levels is really aesthetically pleasing because, well, it just somehow managed to fit in pretty nicely with all that. Well, you get the idea. I know for a fact it has been about quite a few hours since we actually last done some more recording sessions on this. Plus, it's mainly because, as you can definitely tell, that we have no idea what the heck is going on at the moment when it comes to, like, new announcements and all that jazz, especially concerning for all that particular point where, basically, ever since yesterday, that we've already celebrated the 14th anniversary of the Maxi Toys YouTube channel so far, and generally speaking, that was about the fact that we already know that Coco Bandicoot did somehow manage able to win the Wii Sports bowling thing, and as a result though, they had a lot of fun, including with the forms of Blaze the Cat, Jewel the Macaw, and of course Joy from Inside Out. So either way, and speaking of Inside Out though, I did somehow realize about this, is about the fact that this year will mark the 10th anniversary of Inside Out, so we can potentially try to able to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Inside Out, alongside with the forms of the 30th anniversary of Toy Story. So either way, look how many ants there are. I mean, obviously they're trying to run for the actual colony or something like that. Or generally speaking, though, Tails, is about the fact that you obviously do watch a lot of ants. Oh yeah, because obviously though, that Ants was the very first DreamWorks fully animated film in 1998, so no matter what though, is about the fact that despite the actual box office didn't exactly go according to plan, because obviously though, that came out roughly the exact same year as in A Bug's Life. So yeah, you get the idea for that point. And same applies with that though, Tails, is about the fact that those two films in particular also came out during the exact same year as in The Prince of Egypt, despite the fact that The Prince of Egypt was originally going to be the very first DreamWorks fully animated feature, but actually as it turns out, that's not the case, because ants exist. So oh yeah, because, you know, that film features Woody Allen as Z, and I would say Sharon Stone as Princess Bala, and even especially noticeable with Sylvester Stallone as Weaver, and even with the films of Jennifer Lopez that she did as Tekka, and even with Janet Hackman, that he did the voice of General Mandible, and in addition with the films of what was the other characters I could probably think about? Oh, Danny Glover, that he did Barbados during the forms of the actual Ant War against with the termites and stuff like that. And even Christopher Walken, that he did the voice of Cutter, which appears to be, you know, General Mandible's henchman and stuff like that. So I think that's as far as we can able to actually try to memorize the voice talents of the forms of ants as a film itself. But either way, so far so good that we didn't suffer any deaths on it so far, but eventually at some point that the game will ramp up difficulty tremendously as soon as we're able to actually get into like the next couple of worlds, in addition with the forms of some temple stages as well. So anyway, so what was the last time I left off when it comes to mention something related to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds? Oh yeah, apart from the fact that there's going to be another track which appears to be Unknown Rocky Grassland kind of track. Journey forms of one of those TBA kind of syndrome. As well as from that, Radical Highway is going to make its appearance for that particular racetrack. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool, especially concerning for all that, well, Shadow Generations was now a thing, of course, so relatively speaking, I guess that makes it totally obvious they're able to actually include Radical Highway for one of those racetracks they'll try to bring back, or technically try to bring in and stuff like that. So anyway, in addition to that, I do know just about the fact that one of the items in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, that's what appears to be for the fact that there's an item called King Boom Boo, based off from Sonic Adventure 2 as one of the boss battles in that game. It turns out about the fact that that item during the gameplay, it looks kind of familiar to me, which I know for a fact that it may functions very similar to one of those items in any other Mario Kart games, well, apart from few exceptions, which appears to be Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart Super Circuit, probably because of limitations and all that stuff. But usually, relatively speaking, though, I'm referring to as one of those items they somehow introduced, since in Mario Kart 64, all the way up to, technically, Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, and that's what appears to be, there's an item called the Spiny Shell, where basically, though, if you use that item, it'll just directly try to attack the player who is actually in first place. And then I figured that one of those items in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which is of course King Boom Boo, basically it'll function the same way as this blue spiny shell in any Mario Kart game, where, according to the description, King Boom Boo will attack the player in first place. So as a result, yeah, that sounds a lot familiar. So as a result though, yeah, I can totally see why for the fact that this year we're able to make its competition once again, except this time with the forms of kart racing genre, with both Mario and Sonic and stuff like that. So anyway, and there's also another thing else we'd like to point out as well. In terms of the forms of, well, currently, as for right now, is about the fact that when it comes to, accurately, the character roster and stuff like that, there's gonna be, excuse me, there's gonna be likely, 23 playable characters, and maybe they'll try to add it in more playable characters to the roster, because obviously though, as we've already mentioned about this earlier, that there's going to be some playable characters based off from Sonic Prime. It's definitely going to be coming. So I'm really hoping about the fact that that'll be a separate DLC, much like the forms of how it does it on the Digital Deluxe pack for the likes of the forms of Sonic Colors Ultimate for its separate DLC, alongside with the forms of Sonic Origins and Sonic Superstars, and even with the forms of Sonic X Shadow Generations, because if that seems to be the case, then we can definitely be looking forward to able to actually doing that particular Let's Play of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. Not this year though, but definitely for next year for sure, for 2026, not only for trying to be potentially trying to think about trying to tackle through the DS version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, but also about the fact that we can able to celebrate the 35th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog, well, such as myself, until specifically next year in 2026. So, alongside with the films that are around the same exact time frame as in one of those other films is going to be releasing for 2026, ranging from the new Super Mario Bros. Movie, or should I say the Super Mario Bros. Movie 2, and also Shrek 5, Ice Age 6, and Minions 3 for some reason. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I keep thinking about something else. But anyway, so now let's move on to the next level, which appears to be Crazy Kart. And this is one of those levels they'll bring us into the minecart stage. So, are you up for this point, Tails? Yeah, I can totally get it about the fact that these stages are going to be pretty tough, especially during at some point later on. but we already know for certain for one thing is that much like defaults of how it does on the Wii version, and in addition to the 3DS version as well, if we do die multiple times on a single level, in addition with boss battles as well, and heck, even especially noticeable with the temple levels as well coming up, that if you do die multiple times, guess what? They never able to actually give us a break, and that's what appears to be that particular tutorial pig, which as a result, yeah, it will just once again trying to activate the super guide mode function turned on, which obviously does nothing new really, because unlike in Tropical Freeze, at the very least with Tropical Freeze, the tutorial pig is nowhere near as annoying as in this game does, because obviously though we just love challenging kind of stuff, but as a result, we just don't feel like trying to activate the super guide mode from now on until we show that off on the extra stuff. So anyway, yeah, I guess that's as far as we can able to talk about, in terms of something relates to, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. I mean, still, no matter what though, we still got incredibly hyped about the game now. And in addition to that, there's also some other descriptions for it. Like, for instance though, there's gonna be a grand total of 23, different power-up items, including returning favorites, and all new items like the monster truck items, so yeah, that could be interesting. In addition to that, you can also choose from 45 unique original vehicles, including extreme gear boards, and mix and match characters and vehicles to find the perfect combination. So I guess that's pretty cool though, especially concerning for that particular point where that could be its major selling point when it comes to likely for the entire game itself, likely able to actually have a combination of go-karts or cars in general, alongside with the forms of extreme gear boards at the same time. I mean, who knows? We might able to actually hear more about it. Probably at some point for the likes of the Summer Game Fest or something like that. Enjoy it at some point in this year, but we're not exactly 100% sure about that just yet. So, anyway, and finally, most notably though, is about the fact that there's going to be a closed beta testing for the likes of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and as far as I'm aware, they did some mentions about the forms that there's going to be some limited amount of stuff you can choose. Like, for instance though, when it comes to the character roster in the closed beta version of the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, I believe you can only choose for about 9 playable characters, which appears to be Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, Shadow, Eggman, Omega, or in some cases E123 Omega, Zaz from Sonic Lost World, and Cream the Rabbit. So yeah, I guess that makes it a little bit more obvious than ever. So, and meanwhile, when it comes to tracks though, you can only select up to 6 tracks at the moment, which appears to be E Stadium, Rainbow Garden, Water Palace, Metal Harbor, Ocean View, and Wonder Museum. And as far as I'm aware, there's also going to be Cross Worlds, which I think there's going to be only 5 of them will be opened, which appears to be Roulette Road, and Dinosaur Jungle, Kraken Bay, Lava Cave, and finally Sky Road. And finally, when it comes to other modes, which appears to be there's only like 3 modes you can able to actually access to. That's what appears to be World Match, machine customization, and gadgets customization. So yeah, my guess was about the fact that the gadgets will be another unique thing will be added in to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds for sure. And also, as far as I'm aware, the game will now going to be developed by Sonic Team ever since, well, the majority of the Sonic Riders games since Sonic Free Riders. So yeah, I guess that might be a perfect opportunity that, well, Sonic Team is now going to be working on in a Sonic Racing game at long last. Because usually, unlike in the past 3, Sonic Racing games that involves around carts and stuff, that originally though the actual developer was actually responsible for those 3 previous games, which appears to be Sumo Digital. Whilst it is very unfortunate that Sumo Digital is not going to be working on that project now. Last is mainly because I'm not exactly sure what's really happened for that point. I mean, do you get the idea for this point, Tails? Well, it's hard for me to talk about this for the sake of time, but I do know there's actually another thing I want to classify for mentioning about this actually, is that, did you know, it's been 20 years since YouTube was first in existence back in 2005, specifically in Valentine's Day. Oh yeah, we totally forgot about that part, especially because concerning for all that, we've been busy recently, especially noticeable concerning for the fact that we've already played through quite a lot of games in our spare own time, ranging from Mario Luigi Brothership, which as a result so far, that we've almost at the halfway point in that game on our spare own time. I mean sure, no matter what though, from what I've heard, the game was gonna get a much more longer in terms of the forms of the story progression and stuff like that. I mean, relatively speaking, that's as far as I can try to describe it. So, anyways, as you can see, we somehow tackled for the first temple level, and we did this, or should I say I managed to did this level no problem, thanks to, of course, Diddy Kong, because his jetpack is pretty useful in this game, although, unlike in Tropical Freeze, that it's pretty weird that we're going backwards in terms of trying to get used to with the latest Donkey Kong games up to that point. I mean, the only reason why that the HD version of this game is now existent on the Switch version is to able to try to complete the whole set of the Donkey Kong Country games onto one specific system. I mean, aside from the fact that we are missing a couple of those Donkey Kong Country games on the Switch right now, that's what appears to be the notorious Game Boy Color version of Donkey Kong Country 1. Alongside with that, there's also the Game Boy Advance remakes of Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3, and finally Donkey Kong 64, which, if I can recall that correctly, so... Alright, so here we go on to the first boss in this version of the game. I mean, it's nothing new, aside from the fact that we can now able to take him on in the quickest way imaginable, thanks to the fact that Tails is trying to do that particular strategy where basically though it's about the fact that just like the forms of how it does it from the Wii original version, alongside with the 3DS version as well, that obviously though as soon as you're able to go through the first 3 hits, then he'll essentially move on to the next phase, even though despite the fact he did have some bit of mistakes there because of hesitation. But regardless of such though, this boss is pretty much the easiest boss in the game by far, especially because, this is the very first boss, but eventually at some point, that certain bosses might give us some bit of trouble, especially about the fact that on my spare own time, for one of those modes in particular, which again we'll save that topic for later, but straight to the point though, we can able to actually finish him off, like so. And that pretty much does it for the likes of the Jungle World. So, again, self-explanatory, because again, we've already experienced this before, except now, I will admit it though right away, I do honestly prefer without motion controls on, just because it will start to get a little bit tiring after a while when it comes to certain actions, but regardless of such though, let's go ahead and finish him off with the forms of this glorious fist punch, but now with button mashing, so... it might not be as efficient though, Sonic, but regardless of such though, let's see how many hits I did somehow manage able to finish him off, and... oh, I only hit him about a grand total of 19 hits, so... yeah, it's definitely a little bit impossible to able to reach for about 20 hits, just because, again, we pretty much used it with motion controls in the exact right moment. However, if you try to punch this, one of the Tiki tribes a bit too early, it only counts as 1 hit. So, yeah, that's something worth noting for. So, there we go. The Jungle World has been completely done, and as a result, we can now move on to the next world, which is the Beach World. So with that being said, folks, is that we get endings of this point right here. So join us next time for more of Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD for the Nintendo Switch. Is that we're going into World 2, which is the Beach World. So... don't expect about the fact that certain worlds can get pretty lengthy later on, but regardless of such though, yeah, sometimes it usually happens. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas. See you guys then.